Hello, I'm Christine Sato Yamazaki, Executive Director of the National Veterans Network. I'm delighted to share a unique project we've been working on in collaboration with the National Museum of the U.S. Army. The museum is currently displaying the Nisei Soldier Experience, a special exhibit that showcases a rare collection of artifacts that captures the story of the Japanese-American Nisei soldiers during World War II. Today, we are taking a closer look at one of the artifacts in the Nisei Soldier exhibit. This object is a helmet belonging to Private George Sakato of the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, which he wore during the rescue of the Lost Battalion, a tremendous feat of valor which earned him a Medal of Honor. In the clips ahead, Paul Morando, Chief of Exhibit at the museum, shares the objects with the descendants of the Japanese-American veterans. Thank you very much for joining us as we explore this important piece of American history.
Due to COVID-19, I haven't been able to talk to my grandfather as much as I would like, and right now I just know him as Grandpa, but I know that a long time ago he was a lot more than just Grandpa, and I would love to learn more about who he was. All I know is that he served in military intelligence during World War II, and I take great pride in that, but I never knew what it was like from his standpoint.
My great-grandfather fought in the war in the 442nd Regiment, and it's been an intriguing topic to me ever since I was young. And this opportunity that was brought upon me, it seems like the perfect opportunity to learn more about what they fought in during the World War II.
I'm really eager to learn about this. I learned that this even existed a few months ago, and ever since then it's just really interested me. And it'd be really interesting to talk to people who are experts on the subject, but not only that, people that are in what I assume is a similar situation to me, who only learned recently of their relatives who took part in this really amazing thing.
It's great to be here talking with you today about George Sakato and his helmet. So I thank you, Dylan, Kyle, and Ayumi for joining me to have a conversation. I want this to be a two-way conversation about George Sakato and his helmet, which is an artifact that's on display at the National Museum of the United States Army. And as the chief curator, that's my job, is to interpret objects like this helmet, to educate the public on his story and what he contributed to the Army. So I'm in charge of all the exhibits, of all the artifacts that are on display. And of course, one of the objects that we have on display in our Nisei Soldiers Gallery is this helmet that belonged to George Sakato. So I'm not going to go too much detail about the helmet and George, because I want you to ask me those questions and we can dig deeper into his story. So George Taro Sakato was known as Joe to his friends, and he joined the Army in March of 1944 as an infantry rifleman with the 3rd Platoon, Company E, 2nd Battalion of the 442nd. So Dylan, I want to start with you and sort of begin this conversation about George. So what questions do you have of me?
So my first question was, how were Saburo Tanamachi and George Sakato connected? Kind of like, just how did they end up being friends and everything?
Yeah, they served together in the 442, so they got to know each other, as soldiers do in training, or when you're in the same unit together, you become friends, and so that's how they were connected. And of course, unfortunately, Saburo Tanamachi was killed in action and witnessed by George Sakato. So it had a deep impact on George. Imagine your best friend, a high school buddy or someone close to you, is shot and killed right next to you. Very powerful and very, very hard to deal with. And so other questions you may have.
yeah, about the the Lost Battalion. I was just
Mhm.
kind of like, who was the Lost Battalion? Because I know that's a really large part of the history of the Nisei.
Yep, it's probably the most famous battle that the Nisei soldiers fought in, so especially the 442, and the Lost Battalion were soldiers from the 141st Infantry Regiment that were cut off basically from the rest of their regiments in the mountains of France and surrounded by German soldiers. And, they would have been totally wiped out if it wasn't for the 442 going in there and rescuing those soldiers. So once again, the Germans had them surrounded. In fact, it was almost 6,000 German soldiers, right, closing in on the Lost Battalion. But they finally broke through and were able to rescue those soldiers. It was just an amazing feat of heroism and bravery.
Wondering, we're learning about George Sakato, but I was wondering what his role, what was George Sakato's role in rescuing the Lost Battalion?
Right. Well, he was part of that push to break through the German lines. His actions on Hill 617 was where um, you know what he was awarded the Medal of Honor for. So he led a charge up that hill, really coming from seeing his friend Saburo Tanamachi being killed. He got angry, right, furious. Emotion took over, and he led this charge up the hill, killing 12 enemy soldiers on his own, wounding 2 enemy soldiers, and then personally capturing 4 enemy soldiers. And then he continued to assist his platoon in taking 34 additional prisoners of war. And did that wearing the helmet that's on display at the museum. So, it was a remarkable feat of courage, and that's why this helmet is on display in the National Army Museum.
Yeah, I had a question. So I
Mhm.
heard that George Sakato, he tried to climb into his helmet. What did that exactly like mean?
Yeah.
How do you
So
climb into a helmet?
right. So if you look at the helmet now, right, it's it's small, right? It's meant to just fit over your head. No different than any, whether it's a football helmet or a bicycle helmet. So he made that in reference to he was looking for cover from artillery shells that were slamming down around him. So these artillery shells were hitting him, his foxhole, and so he said that as kind of a way to wish he can just climb inside his helmet to be protected from the shrapnel, from the artillery, the noise, and the sound. Obviously, physically, it's impossible to climb inside your helmet, but it just gives you an idea of how important something of this type of equipment is to a soldier. Obviously, it's meant for protection from bullets and shrapnel, but also mentally, it's a form of protection.
And one last question.
Mm-hmm.
When he went in and just like ran up the hill and shot like 12 soldiers and captured many more,
Mm-hmm.
like how did he do that without getting shot?
It's a difficult question to answer because easily could have been killed for doing that. But I think a little bit of luck, maybe said some prayers on his way up, or and he knew exactly what he was doing, and he just fought through it.
Why it takes so long for him to be awarded the Medal of Honor?
Yeah, that's a great question. And here you see a picture of George Sakato. So he was, right after his action on Hill 617, he was put in for the Medal of Honor initially. And he was nominated for it, but it was turned down. It was disapproved. So instead, he was given what is known as this Distinguished Service Cross, which is the next level down from the Medal of Honor, the second highest medal a soldier can be awarded. But during that time in World War II, Japanese Americans, faced discrimination. So they didn't necessarily get awarded, medals of honor initially. And whereas other soldiers who did similar deeds, like George Sakato, would automatically get the Medal of Honor. So it wasn't until the year 2000.
For their numbers and length of service, the Japanese Americans of the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, including the 100th Infantry Battalion, became the most decorated unit in American military history. We recognize them today with our nation's highest military honor, the Medal of Honor.
Was it because of his race that it was turned down the first time?
I don't know the specifics of that, but that a lot of soldiers, Asian American soldiers or African American soldiers who did great deeds, heroic, did not initially receive the Medal of Honor, and it took a long time for them to be properly recognized for their actions. And I can probably say, in truth, a lot of it had to do with their race at the time.
Rarely has a nation been so well served by a people it had so ill-treated.
So how did you get one, or did you have to buy it, or was it donated?
Yeah, so the majority of artifacts, especially related to the Nisei soldiers, were donated by family members. Even the helmet from George Sakato was donated by a family member. So, a while back, the museum partnered with the National Veterans Network, an organization that tells the Nisei story and helps tell the Nisei story. And we were able to reach out with family members who had these items, these personal objects that they held so dear, and they were comfortable with us to donate these objects. And that majority of them, that's how we received them into the museum. And those stories that resonate are the ones that we want on display. Like George Sakato's helmet, like others that we have on display, Sadao Munamori's Medal of Honor. These stories are extremely powerful because it tells an American story, and stories that not many people know about because they were Japanese American and not necessarily highlighted or focused on throughout the Army's history. So now we have an opportunity to tell their story, right? To see these objects up close because that these items were donated by their family members.
And then my last question is, what was his civilian life after leaving the military?
Yeah, he got out of the military. He settled down in Denver, Colorado. He worked for the post office as a postal clerk for over 32 years. So he had a very successful life after the Army, and that's how he spent his civilian time. Well, Dylan, Kyle, and Ayumi, I want to thank you for joining me to have this conversation. I always learn something new, even talking to you. I've learned information, and it makes me know more about this story, because it's your story, because you're connected through family, whether it's your great-grandfather or your great-uncle or whatever. You're part of this story. And I hope to see you in the museum someday, and we can talk more about George Sakato's helmet and more about the objects that are also on display at the museum. So thank you, and take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
In the beginning of the meeting, I was a little bit scared, but once we started asking questions, I got more comfortable. And one thing I learned was how much of an honor it was to be awarded the Medal of Honor, and to know that George Sakato, my own grandfather, and many, many other Japanese American soldiers were awarded the Medal of Honor, and they were given the credit that they deserved. It was many, many years later, but they did get it, and I think that's really incredible.
It was really interesting to me, and I'm definitely excited to learn more about it. Just the fact that these people's blood is in my veins, and they fought for our country so hard, and all these really amazing stories. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot, and I feel kind of a lot closer to my bloodline, I guess. But yeah, I feel a lot closer to the story of my ancestors and kind of America as a whole.
This was a fun and educational experience. We got to learn lots of things about the war and what they fought for. They helped capture and save many people, even though they were discriminated against and they weren't even seen as equals back then. And I'm glad I got to learn the story about one of those people who were discriminated, yet he fought for his nation. And I'm glad that I have a great-grandfather who fought in the 442nd and did what he did and fought for his nation, his family, and friends, and all the sacrifices they had to take. So, yeah, overall, it was a fun experience, and I hope to learn more. After quarantine, we can all go to the National Museum and learn.